it has been a really great event for all our customers and new customers. It's been something that our customer love to have, is to continue to have conversation with each other and also with Microsoft, who continue to innovate, right? And every time we're fortunate to have John and Cosmos here to share their thoughts and answer questions. As this product continue to evolve and being tested against a lot of questions and continue to make sure that all our customers are getting the latest information, because things changes. So we'll get started today, and we have Cosmos and John here today. But for our meetup is quite informal, guys. So we encourage all our customers just to speak up, right? There's no, you could chat, but we want you to just raise your hand, go, I want to ask the questions, and make sure you could get your question answered, because there's a lot of stuff that we do. All of you guys are doing this every day, and these are your production units, and we want to make sure you feel comfortable running these production units in the whole entire process. So without further ado, Cosmos, maybe you could introduce yourself. I don't think you need to, but get us started.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Howard, and thanks everybody for joining. These are great. I love that this is a regular occurrence now. So my name is Cosmos Darwin. I'm a senior program manager on the Azure Edge and Platform team at Microsoft. I'm specifically responsible for our strategy with Azure Stack HCI and sort of helping to ensure that all the things we actually set out to do, we get done on the team. So we have a growing engineering organization that works on hyper-converged infrastructure. There's a lot of stuff that the team is working on, and I do my best to make sure we actually deliver those things that we set out to deliver. And then as you pointed out, I'm not the only one from Microsoft here today. We've also got John Marlin. John, do you want to say hello?
Hey everybody, I'm John Marlin. I'm one of the program managers. I work with Cosmos with Azure Stack HCI with failover clustering, disaster recovery, stretch, storage replica, several other little things.
Yeah, so Howard, I don't know how you want to divvy up the time here. I had a couple of different ideas. One thing is, if there are folks who aren't familiar with some of the big news that we announced for Azure Stack HCI at Microsoft Inspire, I would love to at least put in a plug for some of that content that's available, because it's all available on demand. Everything that was presented at Inspire, from the CEO keynote where Satya talked about HCI all the way down to my breakout session where all we did was talk about HCI, all of that's available on demand. So I at least want to put in a good plug for that. I have something I want to show that folks haven't seen before. It's a small little thing the team's working on, but I'd actually love to get feedback. So I created a little survey if folks are willing to humor me with that. And then besides that, I figure we can just take questions and see where the conversation leads us. Does that sound kind of like what you had in mind, Howard?
That's exactly what I have in mind. I think just if you could just recap a little bit, there's pretty big news you guys announced on Inspire. Make sure everybody's on the same page. Then hopefully you can offer something fun to this team. I think this team here, all the customers follow you guys pretty closely. So share with them what's the news and open up for questions. I think that's a great way to do it.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah. So in that case, let me just share my screen, and I'll spend just a couple of minutes recapping Inspire. I won't cover everything because we do have, like I said, the recording available. So let me know when you can see my screen here. It's coming through?
Yep, we can see it.
Yes.
Cool. So for anyone who missed it, right, Microsoft Inspire is one of our big conferences over the course of the year. Ignite is obviously the conference that I think most folks are most familiar with because it's been many years running now, and it's completely focused on innovations for IT, especially for on-prem and cloud scenarios in IT. So Ignite is the conference that's coming up in September, but we have this Inspire conference that happened in July, so about a month ago. And at that conference, we actually announced some pretty big and pretty exciting transformations for Azure Stack HCI. So I wanted to give just a quick recap of some of the things that we talked about. The long and short of it, I really will cut to the chase here, is whereas Azure Stack HCI previously referred to a hardware validation program, essentially, where you used an off-the-shelf copy of Windows Server 2019 Data Center, and then you could build a hyper-converged infrastructure using that. There's now actually a dedicated product offering from Microsoft called Azure Stack HCI. There is software that you can install that is called Azure Stack HCI. It's not just Windows Server now with a brand name. So this new Azure Stack HCI is a purpose-built subscription service for hyper-converged infrastructure from Microsoft. It still runs on your hardware, on your premises that you control, but there's some pretty exciting differences that our team is actually really proud of and really eager to keep building on in this new Azure Stack HCI subscription product. When we talked about it at Inspire, we sort of tried to frame it using what's shown on this slide here, which is really there's three important pieces to understand if you really want to unpack what the new Azure Stack HCI is. First and foremost, it's a hyper-converged infrastructure stack, right? That hasn't changed. And so it is a hypervisor, a world-class hypervisor, the same one we use in Microsoft Azure, with built-in software-defined storage, built-in software-defined networking that you, the customer, can install on your hardware, on your premises, and manage. But it's delivered as an Azure hybrid service. And that's the one thing I do want to talk about here specifically is I'll get into the details of what really that means, because that's kind of confusing, right? Is it hosted? No, it's not hosted. It's still on your servers. Okay, well then what does that mean? So I'll talk about that. And the third and very important thing is every time we have the opportunity to make a design decision here, we're trying to ensure we keep things familiar for IT so that it's easy to manage, easy to operate. To the extent possible, we don't want to change things just for the sake of changing them. We want to continue to provide a set of familiar experiences so that IT teams, everywhere who have tools and processes that they have already invested in can continue to use those to the extent that it makes sense to do so with HCI. So I'm going to skip directly to that kind of middle pillar, if you will, to sort of describe what that means, because that's, I think, the most new and potentially jarring for some folks aspect of this announcement. So I'll just skip ahead here and sort of unpack what we mean when we say Azure Stack HCI, the new one, is delivered as an Azure hybrid service. What it means is it actually natively integrates with Microsoft Azure. So there's not an agent that you need. There's not something that you need to search for and approve and download and hook up. Like the operating system has built into it the ability to integrate with Azure and be projected into the Azure portal as a first-class Azure resource that shows up in the context of your subscription. And it's actually probably easiest just to do a quick demo of that to kind of demystify what I'm referring to here. Because resources and resource groups and like what does that all mean? If you're not an existing Azure customer, some of this stuff can sound kind of like scary. So I'll just do a really quick demo, right? If you've used Azure before, then you've almost certainly gone to portal.azure.com before. And this is kind of the user interface for everything in Azure, where you can do things the first few times here and then probably learn how to script them going forward. So this is familiar to anyone who's used Azure, but what you haven't seen before is this Azure Stack HCI resource type that is now a first-class object here in Azure. This is something that was never possible prior to July. This actually shows me all of my Azure Stack HCI clusters that are connected to Azure. And again, there's not an agent that I need for that. It's just a native facility of the new Azure Stack HCI operating system. And then for each of those clusters, I can pop open a page like the one you're seeing here and actually see some information about that Azure Stack HCI cluster directly here in the Azure portal. So I can see, for example, this is a 2-server cluster. Both of the servers are these small little edge servers. I can see how many cores they have. I can see how much memory they have and things like that. Now, this is just the beginning. So over the next few months and years, the amount of management options that are available here is going to increase. Our focus in the Azure portal is really going to be around at-scale management. You'll see in a little bit that Windows Admin Center is still extremely important for us in terms of all of the day-to-day management and setup of Azure Stack HCI. That's where we're investing heavily for day-to-day management and initial provisioning and troubleshooting and performance and things like that. But if you have 10 or 100 Azure Stack HCIs, it's very convenient to be able to see all of them in a single pane of glass here in the Azure portal. And because this is a first-class Azure resource, there's actually a bunch of things that I can do that are just sort of inherent to the Azure Resource Manager or ARM model. So I can tag my clusters, I can organize them into resource groups, I can see them all in a single list no matter where they are in the world. And I can actually leverage identity access management to control which users in my Azure Active Directory can see these clusters and make changes to them. Now, as part of transforming Azure Stack HCI, specifically this new purpose-built Azure Stack HCI operating system into a cloud service, this is part of it, right? This is the sort of management piece, but there's a lot of other aspects too. One thing we know is that Azure customers love Azure Support. Customer satisfaction numbers have been steadily rising for a long time now. It's actually a really, really popular part of Azure. And so this new Azure Stack HCI is covered under Azure Support, which means if you have an existing Azure Support plan, whether that's the $29 a month one for developers or $100 a month for standard, that covers as many Azure Stack HCI clusters as you have. And you can request support directly from the Azure Portal and get that kind of Azure support experience where you reach a dedicated team specifically for the service you're interested in, which in this case is Azure Stack HCI. And then last, but certainly not least, this new Azure Stack HCI as a service is actually transacted through Azure, just like any other cloud service that you use. So if you're an existing Azure customer, which more than 95% of the Fortune 500 are, and there's thousands and thousands more smaller companies, of course, who use Azure too. If you're an existing Azure customer, then you have an Azure subscription, or probably many actually already, and all of the different cloud services that you use are just billed directly to that Azure subscription, and Azure Stack HCI works the same way. So rather than an upfront software license, which has been the sort of traditional way with Windows Server, here you pay on an ongoing basis and you always get the latest features. There's no concept of versions. So you don't really have to like buy this version and then decide next time, oh, is it worth it? Should I buy the new version? I guess I'll start over and pay all over again. That all goes away. It's now just an always up-to-date subscription service where you get the latest features as soon as they're available. Now the cost structure for this is specifically designed to be very simple. So how many virtual machines you have does not change the price for HCI. How much memory you have, how much storage you have, how much network ingress or egress you have, like none of that actually changes the HCI cost. It's purely based on how many physical processor cores you have. And it's a simple price point that scales all the way up and all the way down. So as you can see on this slide, the price point once the product gets to general availability will be $10 US per processor core per month. And what that means is these smaller servers, like for example, the 8-core server I show here or the 4-core server, actually become really, really affordable compared to how they might have looked before when you had to purchase 2 copies of Windows Server Data Center Edition up front. So we're pretty excited about that and how it's going to open up new opportunities, especially in the lower end for like edge deployments of HCI, which is quickly becoming a big segment for us. So what I've just talked about is sort of transforming Azure Stack HCI towards something that is really hybrid first, that is intended for a world where a chunk of your infrastructure is residing on-prem, because we think that's super important, but also where we acknowledge that a chunk of it is running in the cloud as well, right? And you're likely an Azure customer already, and so that becomes a convenient way for you to get HCI too. Now this builds on existing investments that we've shared over recent years to add hybrid capabilities that actually even work with Windows Server, right? So we've talked about hybrid networking, using Azure Site Recovery and Azure Backup. We've talked about Azure Arc at length over the last couple of months. So those capabilities are all things that are already available. And then what we've announced this year in July at Inspire really builds on that and transforms Azure Stack HCI itself into a cloud service. And it's just the beginning. There's a ton more that our team is working on, from improving the monitoring experience for HCI, especially when you have hundreds or thousands of different clusters, expanding the availability of the cloud service. Right now it's available in the US and Europe, but bringing it to more regions, as well as a couple of scenarios that I'm personally pretty excited about. One of my favorites here, which I'll show, is something we'll be delivering pretty soon, which is the ability to self-service virtual machines on top of Azure Stack HCI. What I mean by that is once you have an Azure Stack HCI that is registered in the context of an Azure tenant, your Azure tenant, you'll be able to give permissions on a restricted basis to other Azure users within your Azure Active Directory so that they can create their own VMs on top of your Azure Stack HCI cluster. What's cool about that is they'll have the ability to create VMs, but they won't have the ability to go in and like muck up the host infrastructure. So they won't, for example, be able to shut down a host server. So they'll only have the permissions that they need to provision their own VMs. So it doesn't really give you a full hosting platform, but it gives you this kind of lightly isolated notion of tenancy, where for different departments within your organization or for different members of the team, you can allow them to self-service their own apps and workloads without actually jeopardizing, how many people have the ability to go in and modify things on the infrastructure. So this has been a top requested feature. We're pretty excited to deliver this, and Azure is, to our mind, the very clear way to make that happen. So that's what I wanted to recap here. That's just a part of what's new in the new Azure Stack HCI. It's just really that sort of second of 3 areas. If you'd like to see some of what I just showed in a little bit slower speed, or if you'd like to see the full presentation, including sort of the core HCI stack features that are new, such as stretch clustering, and some of the things that we're doing, including partnering with third-party monitoring and backup tools to ensure that this product is familiar for IT. You can go check out the full presentation on the Microsoft Inspire website. And in fact, I will share a link for that just to show there is really nothing complicated about going to find this session. It's one of the only ones that has Azure Stack HCI specifically in the title on the Microsoft Inspire website. You can just click play and watch it. So I will paste this into the chat window. But that is the brief plug that I wanted to put in for the content that we shared at Inspire. So Howard, should I jump into the other thing I wanted to share, or do you want to do questions on this first and then get to the other thing last?
Let's open for question. That's a nice shirt you wore at that presentation there.
I appreciate that. I thought so too, evidently.
We'll open up some questions. Definitely,
yeah,
I'll be going through some stuff. Anybody raise your hand? Oh, right, Matt, raise your hand. I like that.
Hey, Cosmos, how you doing today?
Howdy. It has not been too long since we last spoke. How are you, Matt?
I know, man. I know, it's good stuff. I hate to keep on going back to the licensing thing, but I just wanted a little bit of clarity because I think you pretty much cleared it up for me. But one of the reasons why we decided to go away from VMware at the time, one of the primary reasons was that you could buy data center and license all the guests underneath that, right? It seems like with this new Azure Stack HCI, you're having to actually go back to the old model or like something that's similar to what VMware does, to where you actually have to buy a Windows license for each guest. Can you kind of clarify that just one last time for me? I just want to make sure I understand, what all the costs are going to be involved with that.
Yeah, it's a totally fair question. So you're right. In the Windows Server Data Center Edition, right, you get the technologies that are included as part of it, which is Hyper-V, storage space direct, and so on. And then you also get unlimited Windows guest activation rights with Windows Server. So you're correct. We are trying to move toward a model where it's a little bit more a la carte. Specifically, we've gotten feedback that, for example, Linux customers found it prohibitive that in order to get S2D at all, they needed to buy unlimited Windows, right? So like, how can we separate those things out? So you're right. We are moving in that direction. So the price structure, that's the sort of subscription per core, that covers the HCI infrastructure. If you wanted to do an apples to apples against VMware, that would be the equivalent of like vSphere, vSAN, just enough management, and I guess NSX if you use SDN, right? So it's kind of all of their infrastructure-y things in one subscription. And I encourage you, by the way, to do the price comparisons if you want, because needless to say, their stuff is really expensive by comparison. But yeah, then you have the ability to license the guests and applications that you run on top separately. And so there's a lot of focus as we talk about this on the Windows guest license rights specifically, but of course there's also like a bunch of other operating systems and a bunch of other apps that folks run on top. And I think everyone's accustomed to the idea that you license those separate from the actual virtualization infrastructure. One thing I will say is we are working on delivering the same convenience that people expect. Hello there, waving person. We are working on delivering the same convenient experience that you expect from a UI perspective, so that there will be a way to get inherited VM activation from the host. So if you're like, oh, I don't want to deal with putting a key into every guest, I totally hear you on that. We don't want you to deal with that either. So there will be some way for you to say like, hey, here's an Azure Stack HCI. In addition, I would like to license it for all of the guests, please. You'll flip one switch in one place, and then all of the guests will inherit Windows activation. But we're deliberately separating the like, do you want to buy Windows? Great, buy Windows. Do you want to run our HCI stack? Okay, great, buy our HCI stack. And we are separating those, that's right.
Okay, that's good to know. We have a lot of, I guess, pressure from the community because there's a lot of VMware engineers in the like immediate area. So that was like one of the things we could always say is like, yeah, you know, your education pricing is really good for your VMware software, but we're starting to buy Windows, you know, if we go through VMware, and that argument starts to go away. So it sounds like you kind of understand where we're coming from, which is a good thing. You know, we just want to make sure that like we can clearly and comfortably say, because we, as an education, you do get open records and stuff like that. We can comfortably say this is why we chose it, because we're saving a ton of money just because we're not to buy Windows anymore.
Well, and I would also say you're still going to save money if you're talking about, like Cosmo said, the direct VMware to Hyper-V comparison. You're still saving a lot of money. There's a bunch of flexibility, as Cosmos mentioned. One thing is on the really low end, where we have people that say, you know what, I just need to run 2 or 3 VMs at the edge, running Windows Server, and maybe I've got 1 or 2 running Linux. The data center cost was really hard, and it was very cost prohibitive in those cases. So what I'm excited about is for those edge scenarios, we're actually making it easier for people where they go, you know what, I could use Azure Stack HCI. Maybe I buy 2 copies of Windows Server Standard, which is, now the cost has gone way down. On the other side of this is we did, in terms of cloud, we moved to the subscription model, but we also wanted to make sure that it was predictable. And that was a really important tenet. And I know Cosmos was really focused on driving that because nobody wants the variable pricing. Everybody's shaking their head. The variable pricing can be a challenge. And on premises, no one is used to variable pricing. So the fact that it's literally $10 a core makes it super simple. So I count cores. It's only physical. Run all the VMs you want, but it's just count cores. So we did try to make it as simple as possible.
Thank you very much.
And there's been some other questions too, Matt, and I want to acknowledge that around exactly how does the buying Windows on top part work. So our business planning team's intensely aware of those questions. They're working on a document that I'm hoping will help to clarify that a lot. In terms of versioning, do I put in one specific Windows version key, or is there a way that I can get just always the latest Windows on it? There's a lot of really good questions there, and we're not trying to ignore them. We're not unaware of them. The team's planning on putting together a document that will cover as much of that as we can. But yeah, no, it's a question that I think is a very, very good one, and thank you for asking it.
Yeah, thanks, Cosmo. Appreciate it.
Hey, welcome, Jeff.
Hey there.
Ben, you got the next question.
Jeff Woolsey, everybody, as if you guys needed an introduction.
No,
sorry, I'm a little late. I can only be on for a little while, but I wanted to make sure I stopped in. I love these. These are awesome, awesome events, and I knew you were in great hands with Cosmos. So, but again, love these events. So, thanks, Howard and the DataON team for putting these on.
Ben, you got a question?
Yeah. Cosmos, good to see you, man.
Hey, Ben.
The self-service VMs, the thing that you just showed. Will that include the ability to have some maybe templates for VMs? So when somebody does a self-serve, they start their own VM that it'll already have a template of the 2016 or 2019 that somebody can set up in the background, and so they choose from that.
So that's exactly the scenario space that we're wading into, because those are the types of things people have been asking us for. I mean, yes. Jeff is nodding his head here because it's been the number 1, number 2 request on Admin Center for 3 years. And the challenge has always been how do we actually do the correct design of this, where if you created a template, it's available across all your clusters, across your whole organization, how do we build that in the right way? And this, we believe, is the right way. So the short answer is, in the fullness of time, absolutely. That's the kind of thing we're working on, as well as, and this is, I'm saying in the fullness of time, so this is going to be a multi-step thing, but if you want to make your own template, sure. What if you want to just take one of the ones that's already in the marketplace, right? That would be awfully convenient too, because Azure has the huge marketplace of VM images and more elaborate templates as well. So that's exactly the kind of value we're trying to bring to Azure Stack HCI, but it'll be a staged approach. So in the first preview, I think it will require that you have your own image. You won't be able to grab it from the marketplace, but then over the coming months and years, those are exactly the kinds of things we'll be building out. And that's the kind of automation that we hear customers tell us they want. In Azure, pretty much everything is automatable. You can use Azure Policy and Azure Templates for literally anything in Azure. It's one of the requirements. You can't. We just went through this. You can't ship an Azure service unless you fully support ARM and you fully support templating and you fully support policy. And so as a result, everything in Azure supports that, and that's something we'll absolutely be supporting as well.
Do you have an expectation about, is that when that's coming soon, is there going to be an announcement at Ignite about that, or is that something that we might be able to see within a year of? And the only reason is we had a conversation yesterday where somebody was doing a comparison between VMware and Azure Stack HCI, and this is one of the things they were talking about. We don't really want to go to the full-blown VMM, but we would want the ability to do the templates and all that.
So it is definitely safe to assume you'll have this within a year. We actually, believe it or not, have a much bigger piece of news we're going to be focusing on at Ignite. So this won't be something we talk about much at Ignite. But within a year is a very safe bet.
Okay, thanks a lot.
It's a good question. Thank you, man. It's good to see you, by the way.
Joost?
Yeah, thanks. You too.
You're muted, Joost.
Hi, Cosmos. That was
Hello.
my little kid was waving.
Ah, hello.
he was going to bed. I have a
He had a question.
Yeah, about if a customer needs to have a lot of VMs still on-prem in the beginning. And we know that Intel has a scalable CPU, like an 18 core, and you can scale down to 14 into 8. So they need to start at 18 in the beginning. So they pay for 18 cores per CPU. And they scale down in the future. Is that also covered by the licensing, or how does it work like that?
Yeah, it's a good question. So there is a command, you guys are all experts. So there's a PowerShell command you can run that I believe is get WMI object win32_processor. You can run that on even just your laptop. And someone tell me if I got the syntax wrong, but get -WMI object space win32_processor. That'll return to you the processor with a bunch of properties like number of cores. You can, if you go into the hardware and you actually disable some of the cores, which I think is what you're describing, the billing for Azure Stack HCI will pick up exactly the same thing as that commandlet shows you. So on my laptop, that commandlet shows me 4 cores. So if I somehow manage to enroll my laptop as an Azure Stack HCI host, it'd be $40 a month. Where the number of cores is detected and transmitted up to Azure once a day. And so if you were to change it up or down, the very next day we would pick that up and everything is prorated by the day.
Okay, so you don't watch at the type of CPU. So the 6240Y, it's in it's in the beginning an 18 core, but you can still scale down to 14 to 8. So you don't watch at that kind of thing.
I see the question. Yeah. No, you're right. We are not taking the CPU model number and then looking it up in a table. No, we are checking how many cores it's reporting right now.
Okay, that's good.
That happens once a day. There is at some point we should probably just do a deep dive on exactly what that infrastructure is, but I can sort of give you a sneak peek right now. If you have an HCI of running the latest OS right now, if you do get process and like star HCI star, you'll see there's this new process there. It's a protected process. No matter what you do, you can't get it to stop. And it's just always sitting there in the background, managing all of the complexity of your connection to Azure for you. So it's called HCI SVC, HCI Service. And it's just something that's sort of sitting there determining like, am I connected? Am I disconnected? If I'm connected and it's been a day, okay, let me just say like, yeah, I'm still here. I've got this many cores, that kind of stuff. So that process is sitting there. You can see it, but you can't stop it.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Brandon, got a question?
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Loud and clear.
Perfect. So, and Cosmos, apologize, I've actually hit you with this at Ignite before, but so this is actually probably going to be more of a feature request.
Sure.
On the self-service VM, we are still actually running Windows Azure Pack. And unfortunately, it has us locked into Hyper-V 2016. We're really trying to move forward and progress with that. We have a use case where we have close to customer, high I/O requirements, and also like you were talking about earlier, predictable billing. So we don't charge any ingest or egress rates for any of the machines that we host on our premises. We have a couple data centers we store them in. We run Azure Stack HCI today on the DataON nodes. But really those sort of self-service VM, I'm looking at how we can integrate them in with like VMM networks and things like that, and give tenants the ability to create those that we don't want them to see each other's or anything, just sort of their ownership of their virtual machine.
Okay, was that the question?
Well, yeah, I think it's like more of a feature request. I think I see where you're going today of the self-service virtual machine, but ideally I want to see this evolve into a replacement for Azure Pack, where we can at least have tenant self-service for an on-prem setup.
Yeah, so that is So a couple of different things on that. First of all, totally hear you on it being the logical successor, the logical next step for folks who are using Windows Azure Pack. So I think we're on the same page there. That is definitely top of mind for our team. You also mentioned hooking these virtual machines up to virtual networks. So when we give the kind of one slide version of the VM self-service, we just talk about the VMs. You'll also be able to self-service the virtual networks because you basically need that for an Azure VM to like be meaningful. So it's sort of self-service VMs and virtual networks. Now, to your specific question about like providing guarantees around isolation when you have multiple tenants, especially if the tenants might be hostile to one another on the same platform, I will just be honest with you guys, that's not a huge design point for us right now with Azure Stack HCI. And the reason for that is Azure Stack HCI is one of the Azure Stack products, but we have this portfolio strategy and we have a platform in the form of Azure Stack Hub that provides like very, very complete set of features for hosting scenarios, right? So it has a lot of guarantees around tenant isolation. It will not allow tenants to create a VM that can interfere with someone else's VM. Every single VM has QoS by default. It has an IOPS limit by default. It has memory caps by default. I don't know if you've used an Azure Stack Hub, but like you can't put more VMs on a hub than will fit. Like it's designed sort of more around that set of principles from the get-go, and it natively handles having multiple tenants on the same platform with chargeback for every single gig of storage and every single VM that's running. So because Azure Stack Hub exists and sort of addresses this particular market quite well, we believe, with HCI, we're much more focused on sort of single enterprise, mid-market, small to medium business, those kinds of scenarios with HCI. So self-service, yeah, but the kind of isolation requirements, it may be a while or maybe ever until we actually bring those to HCI. So just want to be forthright with you on that. Jeff's making a funny face. I'll let him.
Yeah, I'm making a funny face, Cosmos, because I kind of know where your head's at, but I'm gonna push back a little bit.
Sure.
So Hyper-V, the core of any hypervisor, the number one role of any hypervisor is quite honestly isolation. And so when it comes to isolation, we actually do that today. Virtual disks, for example, those are completely isolated. Every VM has its own VHD. There's no sharing, that type of thing. Each virtual machine has its own, own hypervisor, hardware isolated, location. There's no sharing of resources. So that's taken care of. From a networking standpoint, now you start to get into things like QoS, and you're totally right. But we do also have the ability to plumb in all of that QoS as well. So I don't want to make it sound like this is not something we're not thinking about or ever going to do, because we absolutely have all the QoS plumbing built in, whether it's in the HCI networking or whether it's in the Hyper-V networking or the complete SDN stack. We can do all that as well. So the way I would look at it is I would slightly change Cosmos's answer to, we're going to do self-service, and personally, I believe what we're going to deliver in the self-service through the Azure integration is going to meet the vast majority of what people are looking for. At the end of the day, when people ask me for self-service and I start to really poke in, like, okay, tell me exactly what you mean by self-service. 9 times out of 10, it's like, I got a bunch of devs over here, and these devs need to be able to spin up VMs. They want to run these things on premises. They want to be able to manage themselves. We don't want to have to manage and deal with those. We want to just basically say, here's your little playground, go play in your little playground in your sandbox. Guess what we're going to do? We're going to enable exactly all of that stuff. And for the people that need it even for production workloads, yeah, fine. You know what? Go ahead and do that as well. If you're looking for rich chargeback, that's actually a perfect example. If you're looking for someone who says, I need chargeback for the amount of IOPS that went out, the amount of IOs that went in and out of a VM, so I can do internal chargeback for someone in my organization through Stack HCI. Whoa, no, that's not something I would actually go after. So I don't think it's more around isolation. I think it's more around chargeback and billing and stuff like that. If you're really trying to do true IaaS, where you actually become a billing model and that type of thing, then I would absolutely point you to Hub and something like that. But I think for the vast majority of what people are looking for from a self-service standpoint, I don't know. I think we're going to actually have a pretty good story with Stack HCI. But again, in the fullness of time, just to be clear, we are doing a whole bunch of work on the admin center side, on the Azure Stack HCI, and of course, all of the integration we're doing with Azure. So it's going to take some time. But I think we're actually pretty in a good spot to get there.
And I think just to simplify what I mean by self-service, so we're actually a service provider here as well. So we offer lots of connectivity options, and so we're able to basically provide them direct connectivity into our virtualization stack. And so basically through our RBAC or whatever, just be able to have a tenant have a full life cycle of virtual machine. Spin up, create, power on, power off, checkpoint, delete. We do all the networking stuff on the back end, so they don't even have to have access. They just need to, when they provision a virtual machine, see only their network to be able to connect to.
Only see their resources.
Yeah, so, it's a very simple setup on it.
Yeah, so
and
to Jeff's point,
quota, I guess, is the only other thing that we do. We do a fixed quota. You get so much proc, RAM, and storage, and then we don't care how much of it you use.
Yeah, so I mean that level of like tenants only see their own things, right? Is certainly part and parcel of the self-service we're creating on HCI. And to Jeff's point, if you want to set up storage quas, I mean that's a feature of the platform you can set up, but it's not going to be one of these things where from the get-go it's designed to like keep the kids apart, you know, at least not in the sense that they can't get in each other's way.
Not initially. I will tell you, I've actually sat down with one of our PMs and said where I want to go. And absolutely, this is one of those things I want to be able to do. I want to say, here's a VM, for example, and here's all of the VHDs, and here you can specify IOPS. And maybe you could even say, here's, you know, a platinum versus a bronze level or something like that. But that's something that's, you know, that's down the line. But again, for what you're talking about, really, what you're really talking about is you just want the ability for tenants to see their own stuff, and I think we're totally in line with what you're asking for.
Awesome, appreciate it, guys.
Good to know. Alexandro, welcome from Wisconsin.
Hey there.
Hello, Howard. Minnesota, close.
Minnesota,
enough,
sorry.
Close enough. My question will be around the supportability. So you mentioned that you have a new support model, like for people who have the new HCI. But if I have both, would I go to different teams? And how you're expecting the Azure team to pick up the HCI, because it's very specialized, and sometimes we have a hard time to get to the SMEs for some problems.
Yeah, it's a good question. So we've actually been recruiting for about 6 months now, mostly internally, to get all of the subject matter experts who are most familiar with the technologies that are part of Azure Stack HCI, so Hyper-V expertise, Storage Spaces Direct expertise. And we've established a special team within Azure Support. So the way Azure Support works is it's a large organization, but every cloud service maps to a team that knows first and foremost about that cloud service. And so when you submit a request for the Azure Stack HCI service, you won't just get routed to like a giant pool of Azure Support engineers. You'll get routed very specifically to a team that has been training for many months now just to support Azure Stack HCI. So you'll get a really, really excellent experience. And actually, there was some discussion yesterday that they're starting to feel eager to handle cases. So it's possible that sometime before general availability, like actually while it's still in preview, we'll actually flip on support and start supporting preview customers, because that team is there and they're like coming to work every day, so to speak, and eager to get started. So
that would be great. Yeah, because and will the on-prem or regular HCI will have the same team routed, or just for a new Azure Stack HCI?
Yeah, it's a good question. So the Azure Stack HCI cloud service will be supported through the Azure Support team, which I just described. Windows Server will continue to be supported through the Windows Commercial Support organization.
Oh, nice. So if I still have my Windows 2019 HCI, then I'll go to the regular Premier process or whatever. Okay.
Yep. Yeah, and so obviously Windows Server 2019 has like a very, very long support cycle, right? It'll be supported in 2029. And there will be future versions of Windows Server, right? So the Windows Commercial Support organization is not going anywhere. It's going to be a big thing for a long time. And one thing to clarify, so if you have Premier, you're covered for either, actually. It turns out that if you have a Premier contract, that covers you for Azure products as well.
Yeah, it's just that the teams, it's different the way you open the case. Sometimes if you go to the Azure Portal, it's routed differently, actually.
Yeah. So, yeah, and Azure customers definitely expect that Azure Portal experience. So that's what we're delivering with the cloudy version of HCI.
Perfect. Thanks, Howard.
That's a good question. Hey, it's good to hear from you, Alessandro.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll ping you guys later. Yeah, I got some ideas too. So.
Oh, I look forward to it. Sounds great.
All right. Thank you.
So I have more questions about Cosmo. Maybe you could share some interesting new feature for the team here, for the group here.
Yeah, so I have It's a small little thing, but I actually would really welcome feedback from this audience on how we do this. So let me share my screen here, and Jeff, I hope you're able to stick around for this too, because your perspective on this is going to be awesome. So let me know when you're able to see my screen.
Yes.
Cool. So the team is working hard on Azure Stack HCI, of course, and that has a ton of pieces. So there's the high profile ones that I just talked about, which is like delivering this as a cloud service, integrating it with the Azure Portal, and we've spent a lot of time talking about those things. But there's like lots of other little things too, right, that the team is working on every day, every week to make better about Azure Stack HCI. And I wanted to shine a light on one of those things, which is the local management tooling experience for Azure Stack HCI. And so the context for this is, we've had Windows Admin Center for about 3 years now. It was at Ignite 2017 when we first announced that, Project Honolulu had a permanent name. It's Windows Admin Center. And in those 3 years, especially for Azure Stack HCI customers, because there's the dashboard, the tools, the workflows, lots of things specifically designed for Azure Stack HCI in Windows Admin Center, right? Like we've been designing everything with HCI in mind from day one. And because there's amazing partner extensions like DataON Must that really help to round out those capabilities with deeper hardware monitoring and other features like that, support, all the different features you guys know very well in Must. Because of this tool set, what we've been finding is actually more and more organizations are standardizing on managing their Azure Stack HCI hosts remotely. Like there's fewer and fewer reasons to actually go interactively log into one of the boxes. And so this kind of begs the question, like, when you do log into an Azure Stack HCI host, right, a virtualization host, what are the tasks that you actually need to perform, and what would the ideal experience for performing those tasks look like? And there's some tasks that come to mind, right? So like configuring IP addresses or DNS so that you can connect remotely at all, enabling remote management, enabling remote desktop, those kinds of things. Joining Active Directory if the machine isn't already domain joined, adding a user into local admins so that you have a set of creds you can use to connect from Admin Center. So these are all things that conceivably, sure, you log in and you do these things locally, and then that sort of hands you off to remote management. And so if these are the tasks that folks need to perform locally, what would the best experience look like for that? And we tried to take a very open mind and open approach to thinking about this on the team. On the one hand, you could go with the classic Windows Server core experience, which is you open it up and there's a blank, empty, blinking command prompt window. There's some issues with that, right? There's sort of zero obvious options. So if you log in and that's what you get, and you're trying to perform a basic task like configuring an IP address, it's not really obvious where you go to do that or how you do that. It's actually kind of incredibly hard to figure out the full syntax that you need to set up networking just to be able to log back out again. So that's one extreme, not great. On the other hand, you could do a full classic Windows desktop-like thing where it's sort of designed to look and feel as much as possible like a Windows 10 laptop. It certainly is easier to figure out how to configure an IP address than it would be with the blank, empty, blinking cursor of a command prompt window. But on this end, there's actually kind of another problem, which is that there's thousands of options that are obvious and easy to get to. They're mostly irrelevant for HCI, like configuring a webcam is not something that you need on your Azure Stack HCI host, so why is there a wizard for it? So you really actually have to kind of dig in, even on this end, to find the options you're looking for. So the question we had was is there actually something in between that would be both helpful and simple for Azure Stack HCI if you do need to log into the box itself? Something that is a focused experience that's designed to make it just super fast to get in, set IP addresses or join a domain or do whatever the task is you actually have to do directly on the box, and then get out and continue on your day using remote tools like Windows Admin Center. And so the team has been putting a fair amount of design thinking into what would this alternative 3, as I have it called here on this slide, what would this look like? What is this kind of something in the middle that's helpful and simple? So I have a couple of sort of early design concepts that the team is working through here. These are things that we have not yet shipped. But if you sort of take a look, right, it's on the one hand, it's sort of text-based, keeps it very, very simple. But on the other hand, it's not a blank blinking cursor. It's actually giving you a couple of quick options like, hey, do you want to configure the server for remote management? Do you want to troubleshoot connectivity, things like that? And so you could imagine that this would work something like, okay, I'm going to configure the server for remote management. I click through, then it gives me, something that is very, very organized, very clear, but also just like it's what I need and nothing more than what I need to configure IP addresses, set DNS, set the default gateway for this machine, really get it connected into my network, join an Active Directory domain if I need to, and then get out again. And there's nothing that says that because this is text-based, we can't do things like, sort of clear guided input. So we show you what's kind of the syntax of what's expected from an input perspective, as well as like graceful error handling, right? Like if you put in an invalid IP, we can catch that here just as well as we could using something that looks and feels more like a light theme graphical user interface. So there's actually a lot of richness we can do here and kind of build something that is just the inbox shell that you really need, not all of the superfluous options, but also not something where you feel stranded and lost when you log in. Now, in the very first public preview of Azure Stack HCI, the one that we announced last month at Inspire, you can see us starting down this path. So we've been laying the foundation for basically actually more than a year now to take a move in this direction. And so when you log into Azure Stack HCI, the new OS, what you see by default is what's on this slide here. You see by default a menu that says Welcome to Azure Stack HCI and presents you with a set of things that we think you actually need to do. Now, this friendly menu that launches by default was, believe it or not, completely rewritten in the last 1 year, specifically for Azure Stack HCI, but it was completely rewritten to look exactly like something that existed before, and then now we're going to start changing it. So that claim that it was completely rewritten catches some folks off guard, because I've heard some people say, well, actually, I kind of recognize this. This looks an awful lot like sconfig, if you're familiar with that tool from before. So over the coming months, not even years, but just like every month, the team is working to iterate on how this tool works and make it really, really awesome for just the things you need when you log in, make some config changes, get out again. So for example, on the left-hand side of the slide, you can see how in the July public preview, the network adapter settings panel looked. And if you have an instance of the HCI OS and you keep applying the monthly patches that are coming out, through a combination of the August and the September changes, you'll see it actually switch to look the way it looks on the right here, which is much more cleanly organized, right? Things are aligned better, and actually there's a few more options as well, things like being able to set a VLAN ID directly from the little guided workflow here. So that's something that we thought was pretty uncontroversial in terms of like, oh, we'll make the network adapters panel better. But there's a dedicated team working on this every day. And we actually had one decision that we've been going back and forth about. So I figured, why not just ask you guys, since we're all here in this community meetup, like, let me just run a super quick survey and see which of two options you guys prefer. So the question that I have, and I'll share a link in a second to a little survey form where you can vote on this if you don't mind, is the main menu itself currently looks the way that it does on the left-hand side of this slide. So the options are numbered, they're ordered in a way that is identical to the classic sconfig tool that was part of Windows Server Core. The reason we did this was, as a default, it seemed like the thing that was most familiar. So if someone had one of these options memorized, if they always just like, the moment it appeared, they typed 7, enter, then it would still work, right? So that's the current design. An alternative design that we're interested in is the one that you see on the right-hand side here, where we've actually reordered, changed the numbering, so it breaks with the past, it's not consistent, but where we've been able to then organize the different options into a set of headings that potentially add more structure to the page. So things that are related to identity and users are all grouped as 1, 2, 3 at the top. Things that are to do with enabling remote access, so configuring network interfaces, ensuring your connection works, allowing remote management over WinRM, things like that. Those are grouped as 4, 5, 6, and so on. So I would love feedback from you guys on sort of how we should navigate this particular design decision of whether the menu, whether that friendly home screen should look as it does on the left or as it does on the right. And so if you wouldn't mind, we created an office form. I only made this morning, and I have been seeing a couple of messages where it sort of warns that it's unsafe or something. So I apologize if you guys see that pop up, but I'm going to share this into the chat window. It's a super, super quick survey. I'll just show you. So if you navigate to it, here's the form. and it says, are you familiar with sconfig from Windows Server? I'm very interested to know how many of you have used that tool before, or if you've never heard of it before. There's no right or wrong answer, but super interested to know. If you are familiar with it, are there any of the options from it that you knew by heart? Or are we crazy to think about that? If so, if you happen to know which ones you knew by heart, that's interesting to us because we can try to keep those ones in the same place. And then among the two options I just presented, which one do you think would make a better home screen for you for Azure Stack HCI? And then any other suggestions you have. So super quick little survey, but we would love to get your input on this because the team is really iterating month after month after month on making this super quick, super convenient to get in, make the changes you need, and get out. So that was what I wanted to share. I'll paste that link in the chat here. Any questions or thoughts or comments on that?
Well, I don't think that it's that big of a change. Some people can't handle change very well, but that's pretty minute actually in the grand scheme of things.
That was my goal. Jeff asked me to bring up something that was probably nobody had seen or thought about before, which hopefully I accomplished.
I see a couple of people suggesting in the chat window that it needs to fit in a remote console session, and that's a really good point. What's the standard or minimum remote console size? Is it 1024 by 768, or is it even smaller than that? It's not 800 by 600 still, is it? Anybody have any feedback on that?
Never thought about that much, I guess.
I would think 1024 by 768 should do it, but I mean, if you're at 800 by 600, you're at VGA levels, and I pity you. I pity the soul that has to work in that environment.
It seems like Ben agrees with you on that one.
I just completed a survey, so we'll see how it goes.
Thank you, Howard.
I have no idea what it means, but I did complete it.
So that's valuable input, right? If you guys are like, dude, I didn't know the option numbers before anyway, so it's fine. I mean, well, this is why we figured we'd ask. And honestly, the team is making pretty rapid progress on designing this kind of like home screen interface. So I feel like there's a pattern we could get into here where we bring one, what was the word Tim used? One minute question a month to your virtual meetup, Howard.
So I'm gonna post two questions from real world customer.
Yeah.
I can't give you guys softball all the time as I started and just let you guys hit it and get a grand slam. So in the last couple months, several of our pretty big customers has deployed Windows Server 16, very happy with it, and they added additional big clusters, 4 or 5 nodes, all flash cluster, running Windows 19. And they did initial testing, everything's good. But somehow when they turn on Dedupe, stuff happening. And we have to really go in several big customers for the last couple of weeks to figure out what's going on. My question was, what stuff are you guys seeing with Dedupe? What are the recommendations you guys have for our customers that's turning on 19 using Dedupe and seeing some issues that you could share with the customer and team here?
Yeah, it's a fair question. So Dedupe is one of the features we were very excited about in Windows Server 2019. We still are. We think it's really, really valuable for certain workloads. I would say we have an awful lot of customers who are very happy with Dedupe, but I'll give the caveat that there's a whole spectrum here of deployment sizes, first of all, and also of how active or how demanding is the workload from a performance perspective. And I would say most of the issues that we've seen, and we have seen some, have been at the very sort of large end of storage capacity deployments. And then also at the folks who have a huge amount of data churn and are kind of unhappy with, in particular, I believe there's a slight increase in read latency. And so we've heard some feedback sort of around the margins there. I'm aware of at least a couple of support cases that are either completed or being worked through with respect to Dedupe. You'll have to forgive me, I don't have all of the details of them like on quick recall. But it's a feature we're pretty committed to, and I think to the extent that we uncover anything that is like not optimal or where something that's actually within our supported limits, like I believe it's 1 terabyte volumes and things like that. I forget what they are. If we uncover something that's actually problematic inside of those limits, we are definitely gonna fix it. So.
Okay. Bye, Jeff. Take care.
See you, Jeff.
Okay, so I guess my takeaway is continue to invest in Dedupe. It's important to you guys. You guys seen some fringe issues. You guys are resolving it. Continue to work with our customer, but it's definitely a feature that Microsoft will continue to make sure that it is covered across as much as you guys can on a spectrum of different applications.
Yeah, we actually have some ambitions that I can't really talk about, but over a multi-year horizon for how we'll make Dedupe even better. So it's not something that we're like moving away from, if that's what you were wondering.
Okay, a second question, and same harder question. This is probably going to fall in John's lap pretty fast. So we've been deploying Stretch Cluster here at DataON. We actually have a real customer that has purchased a 2-node cluster for 2 different sites within a university. And we're doing the entire testing for the last about 3 weeks now. So 2 nodes stretch across the board. We did a webinar 2 weeks ago with John and kind of share some of the findings we have. One of the key takeaway I had learning about the test, and the takeaway was, it was not the automatic I've been selling to the customer as automatic as I wanted to be. In terms of IPs, John, I want to be very specific, right? In terms of networking part of it. Is there a plan in the future for Microsoft to continue to innovate to make sure that automatic definition, it is truly easy?
I'll let John speak to that if he wants to.
Yeah.
Looks like he's getting himself unmuted.
Yes.
It's not, you see, it's not automatic.
Yeah, he's avoiding me. He's talking, but he's not really. He's a Cosmo. Like, see, he doesn't want to talk. Cosmo, you have the answer now. You have no choice. He doesn't want to answer it.
While he's getting his mic issue sorted out, Ben asked a follow-up question in the chat window, which is: are these the IPs on the hosts or IPs on the VMs? Because I know there's a whole slew of best practices that I think John can probably explain related to like how you ensure.
Okay, go ahead, John.
All right, John.
He knows my question.
Okay, basically it's something that we've had for day one. Basically, whenever you're moving virtual machines over to a separate subnet, there has to be some sort of ability for us to change it. Right now, there isn't. There's basically you've got two different ways to do it. 3 if you count one that people really don't do. One is stretch of VLAN cross.
You're cutting out a little bit, John. It's important. You're cutting out a little bit, John. I want to hear what you say.
One is to stretch to VLAN. Nobody really does it anymore because it's very detailed in what you have to do, so that you've got the same, in essence, IP subnet between the 2 sites, so that the virtual machine stuff. But nobody really does that much anymore, and we realize that. So the 2 basic things are, you've got 2 different types of IP address. You've got static, and you've got DHCP. If you use static IP addresses on your virtual machines, then you have to have some sort of script that runs to change that on a fail and to change it back when it goes back to the right side. The other option that makes it more the automatic is to utilize DHCP. One of the final things that it does on a live migration is if it's DHCP, to get a new IP address from a DHCP server. And what you'll also notice is that the MAC address will change since it's on a different system. So those are the 2 basic things you've got. The other thing to consider is the IP address of the virtual machine is going to change. Obviously, nobody else knows about it that was connected to it. So there's some timeouts that are involved. There's DNS that needs to get updated. So we've got some settings from a cluster perspective, where we can lower the amount of the time to live and so forth on the for IPs. But there's a manual process that you'll have to also go through or script to update DNS to get info. Okay, that's the way that it is now. And to be honest with you, this is the way that it's always been. We know that this is an issue, and we are working on it. Our network team is really focused on this, and basically we're going to be building something into SDN to help alleviate that, so that there isn't change that's needed. And
Good.
they're working on it. When it's going to be available, that I can't say, but they know that it's imperative. So it is being worked on. We do realize that it can be an issue, but it's coming.
It's okay, long as we know about it, right? Clearly, you know, me being who I am, I sold it as the, hey, seamless, don't worry about it. Red box, red button goes in, everything's perfect. You know, when Jason tested it and he came out with the report, I'm like, huh? But it's okay. Now we know when we set it up for customer, we could do it properly, which we're totally fine with. But at least the conversation I will have is make sure that I tell the customer what is currently available to do and what Microsoft plans to do in the future. As long as I know about it, I think we're fine. But overall, our experience has been really good.
Correct. And something else just dawned on me. At last Ignite, there was a session that myself, Stephen Ekron, and Greg Costanza did. Towards the tail end of Greg's portion, Greg is one of our networking program managers that does a lot with SDN. What they're going to be doing is, in essence, they'll be stretching. The plan is to stretch SDN across with multiple network components. And that's what he had talked about. And that's what's on the books. That's what they're working.
Okay.
Thank you. When it's something complete, I couldn't say.
So John, y'all's thought is to go re-IP. That's your default for stretch clustering.
If you don't stretch an L2 VLAN across, you'll need to have some sort of changing of the IP address or some sort of routing built in so that clients get connected over to the separate subnet.
Yes, I was just making sure. Will y'all have a best practice document on that when the stretch clustering is available of doing the re-IP? Because a customer might need to do like a re-IP from their Veeam or in addition to this particular technology as well, just to make sure everything is going to the same subnet for the re-IP.
It won't. I won't say it'll be a best practice per se, but I'll be bringing that point back up with blogs, maybe a session or two, webcast, whatever, to bring that back up because it has been a while since we talked about it. I think 2016, 2012 R2 or 2016 was the last time we really talked about it. And I've been trying to, if you've seen some of the blogs and stuff that I've done, I've started to bring back some of the older stuff that we haven't talked about for a while. That's really playing a part in Azure Stack HCI, especially from a stretch.
And the reality, John, is the fact that if I want to sell stretch cluster versus a Veeam replication, I need to make sure everything is black and white what Benjamin is doing today with multiple of our customers. Today, the solution is Azure Stack HCI on both sides, DR and premises, using Veeam to do replication. If I could make stretch cluster as definitely a solution which I want to push, I just need to make sure we're very clear on what to do. That's the reason why Ben is asking, because he's real time doing 3 customers right now doing that exact topic right now.
Yeah, and I'll explain it all out, and I'll actually demo the different ways. So I'll have it all there.
Thank you so much.
One of the other things I'm working on right now, we haven't talked about quorum. We haven't talked about voting and stuff in a long time, because the way that we do votes in a cluster can differ on, say, 4 nodes that are all in the same subnet to multi-site, or stretched with nodes in different sites. There's a slightly different way that we'll do depending on the number of votes that are left, and I'm going to cover all that. But again, a lot of the older stuff that applies from a spec perspective, I'm bubbling all that back up.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. It is a huge topic, it's a huge selling point, it's a huge feature that we're positioning. So I just want to be crystal clear. You can see that a lot of our customers today have 2 sites. Cherokee has 2 sites. A lot of our customers have 2 sites, and they're using different ways, balancing load, Hyper-V replica, spreading the VNs. There's so much thing, but having what you guys are talking about, it's good. Just so you guys know. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I think this is great, Cosmos. I think by continuing to update the team here and the customer on what we're doing, a lot of majority customer today, a Windows Server 19 customer. Clearly, if I put my Microsoft hat on, I want all of them to move to Azure Stack HCI. That's their decision, right? That's their decision what to do. They got to see a tangible benefits of why they should do it and a cost benefit. I think the cost piece of it we talked about earlier today already from Matt Roper, where all of us are aware of it, all right? However, I think stretch cluster could be a reason why many customer wants to go to the Azure Stack HCI now. And I know that was many reasons for many of our customers. So that's why I'm harping on that topic quite hard, because I think that could be a game changer very shortly to move to Azure Stack HCI.
Yeah, it's certainly one of the big and very exciting features of the first version. I would say the thing to keep in mind as well, and I know you know this, Howard, is the cool thing about subscriptions, right, is they always get better. And so if you had sort of done a comparison between, say, Office 365 5 years ago when it first launched and Office 2016 or whatever the version was at the time, you would have said, oh, these are kind of similar, actually. Like, why would I subscribe to this thing? But fast forward 5 years and it looks massively different, right? And the person who just bought Office 2016 and is still there, there's half the options in the ribbon at the top are like new at this point in the Office 365 subscription. And so I think we're in a similar place here with HCI, where like they will get more and more different over time as there's more and more of these things that our team is working on today that will ship 1 year, 2 year, 3 years from now as part of Azure Stack HCI. And so if anyone does kind of a like total cost of ownership type of analysis, and you're saying, oh, I'll take the subscription and I'll multiply it by 3 years or 5 years, like keep in mind 3 and 5 years from now, things are going to look really different. Actually, there's going to be a ton of value there that it's kind of hard to compare apples to apples against a perpetual license. So that's what I would say is important to keep in mind. It's tricky, right? And we can't discuss features that are 5 years out. First of all, because we're probably not going to get our description of them right because they're still being designed. But also just we can't disclose our roadmap that far ahead. So it's a bit tricky, but I would say keep that in mind too.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from the audience before we wrap up? Over an hour. We got Tim. Tim, did you talk or did you mute?
I'm not muted, but I do have a question about your little Kepler 2 nodes. And I know we had this discussion a while ago because it was cost prohibitive to put data center on a 2 node for a customer that's got 4 VMs. And I know you have to buy in bulk to get a good price and stuff. So have you been thinking about that again?
I have absolutely been thinking, and been thinking of buying maybe 100 or 200 first to get started. Just so you know, we have sold these. We have POC going on. I think Cosmo has 2 or 3 of them right now, somewhere sitting in his house or his lab somewhere. I don't know where he uses it quite a bit. So yes, we have been thinking, and there's 2 features on this Kepler 47 you guys don't know about. One is it runs S2D, right? Clearly, and everything we talked about. The Kepler 40 G2 now also will support hardware RAID as a single server storage as well for capacity. So it will do 2 things, and this is literally a request from customers. So yes, Tim, I have to get it out because my partners in Europe, a lot of customer has been requesting it, so I have to invest and probably get MOQ in place and start making it ready for you guys to go. And with the new OS coming out, it is definitely a really good sweet spot that we want to hit.
Cool. I know we have the possibility of selling quite a few, so it's been a big hindrance.
And also, just so you know, another part of the fact is when Isolate comes out, whenever it comes out, and I'm not going to throw Intel under the bus, and next year there will be single servers, right? Single server that supports 4 cores, 8 cores. Today, all our servers are dual core processor. We have no choice, right? But in the future, there is that capability that will also hit the price point as well. So all those, given the new Azure Stack HCI, we're definitely looking at that aspect of it to make sure there's a good cost of entry from a infrastructure perspective.
Yeah. Now, I mean, everyone should feel free to take Gartner's projections for whatever you think they're worth, but the majority of HCI these days is in a data center, which to most folks is, climate controlled room with a raised floor, that kind of stuff. We're seeing a real shift toward HCI being not majority at the edge by any stretch, but it's a significant segment where there's actually a lot of growth. I think Gartner's number was 35% of all HCI would be these sort of smaller systems, which are deliberately being put in a branch office, in a field site, in a retail store, those kinds of things by 2023. And that definitely agrees with what we're seeing. I mean, we have a little distribution internally of like how many cores does a server have, and we're seeing it shift a little. Obviously the data center systems are getting more and more cores, but there's this class of systems that we're sort of trying to cater to here a little bit with smaller needs, right? It's just a couple of apps running at the edge somewhere. So I'm excited to hear you're investing, Howard.
Oh my gosh, we're good. Okay, thank you so much, Cosmos. John, thank you for jumping in again. I appreciate your insights and update to the team. Looking forward to all your feedback, guys. You reach out to us anytime. You guys have direct access to Cosmos and John, and if you have any questions, reach out and stay safe, please. Stay healthy, and let's all get past this COVID together and be able to see each other by next year, okay?
Yes, please. Thank you, everybody. And Howard, we'll do this again sometime.
Will do. Thanks.
Thanks,
Bye.
folks. Thanks, John.
Take care.
Everybody.